Welcome to this episode of the Brush and Soap and Blade Podcast, where we look forward to shaving every day. Welcome to episode 53 of the podcast. My name is Rick DeWeese. I'll be your host today. First off, we'll do some letters. I'm going to talk about fun with a straight razor. Then we'll talk about my experience with an Omega Boar brush, a couple of soaps, one unscented and the other one, well, Tabac. I will then tell you about my razor of the week, the Merkur 37C Slant. I'll then continue on and I'll give you a year in review. It has been a year, folks. It's amazing to think about, but it has been. And thank you for being there, and I'll give you just a brief review, and then I'll follow it up with a rant that I've been thinking about for a long time, and I finally decided, yeah, I'll go ahead and do it. I'll probably make some people mad, but there you go. It's one of those things. Anyhow, thank you very much for being there. Thank you very much for listening. Let's get on with this show. So let's do some letters. The first one, titled New Podcast Listener, is from Thomas. Good day, sir. I just found your podcast thanks to TSE Mr. Bailey. Just finished the episode with Chris Collins, Katie's Bubbles. Going to try that soap. I've been sticking with tallows so far. Anyway, I'm listening via YouTube at work. Will the first 47 episodes be coming to YouTube? My work computer is somewhat limited on what sites I can go to. I will also look for you on my smartphone, but honestly, this Android is smarter than I am. Thanks for the great show, Tom. Well, Tom, I don't know. I don't know if I'll get around to putting all the episodes onto YouTube. You can go to the blog and find them there. I think my old podcast host will keep them around. And hopefully people will be interested in them. If anything happens to them, we'll figure something out. But it does take me a little bit of time and to put them out on YouTube, to turn them into a movie, as it were. So I don't know. I've got other commitments that I also have, and we'll see. I can't promise anything. But, I'm glad you're able to find it. I'm glad that somebody is out there watching it on YouTube, because we just started the channel, and it's kind of neat seeing the YouTube subscriber number go up and see people hopefully enjoying the podcast. So that's a good thing. So the next letter I got was from Mark. Evidence of a checkered past. Recently, my wife asked me to organize my drawers in my bathroom. I hadn't really done this since I began traditional wet shaving. It felt good to put my double edges and straight edge that I use in my shaving rotation in order. It now looks something like this. None of these double-edged razors cost me over $15. One of them was less than $5. The total I spent for these 5 double-edged razors was less than what I spent for one Gillette Fusion and 10 replacement blades. But what really struck me is the collection of expensive handles, blades, and disposable scratch sticks that were left over from how I used to shave. Then I went into the other bathroom that I shave in once in a while and found another elephant graveyard. They sell the basic handles for a couple of blades for a low price. But when you can't afford the cartridges, you end up buying disposable scratch sticks or electric skin scrapers. This mess will soon be shaming a local landfill. My double-edged lineup will be with me for a long time. Who knows? I may be passing some on to the younger folks of my family. Love the podcast and like your motto. I look forward to shaving every day, but spend a lot less money doing it. Mark. Well, Mark, absolutely. It is amazing the things that we collect. And quite honestly, back in the day, somebody was doing that with those double-edged razors, just like you're doing with your plastic disposables now. It is interesting the way that pendulum swings. I will also agree wholeheartedly with your comment about taking those things to the landfill. And like I've said before, essentially what we have in disposable cartridge razors, plastic, a little bit of metal, is nothing but garbage. You can't really recycle it. It's plastic. It has to go to the landfill and be disposed of there, which is a shame because it's going to be there forever. You know, unless you're lucky enough to have something like an incinerator to take care of them. But I will put Mark's pictures up on the blog. It is interesting. He does have a nice collection of disposable plastic razors, and he also has a pretty nice collection of some double-edged razors and a straight razor thrown in there as well. Anyhow, Mark, thank you very much for the letter. I got a comment on the blog from Josh. He says, I really enjoyed your thoughts on being an individual, being different as it relates to movies, and then as it relates to real life. One day, I hope you'll step back and tie it into the big picture stuff, money, politics, war, religion. But just planting the seed in people to think differently is awesome. Well, thank you very much for the comment, Josh. I do appreciate that. It's kind of interesting if you start to step into things like money, politics, war, religion. People become defensive in some cases, and their ability to hear what it is you're trying to say sometimes stops, or at least is diminished a good deal because they take offense to what is being said. What I've found and what is interesting is that I can talk about shave-related stuff, and as it relates to shaving, and it is an avenue that people are not threatened by. I haven't said anybody's good or bad. I'm just asking somebody to think, well, differently, and to try to understand why things are the way they are. There is a risk in any conversation, as you well know, of going into politics or religion. In fact, that's one of the things that people often tell you not to do, even in polite conversation. Don't talk about politics. Don't talk about religion. And then, of course, with the politics and religion comes the war, and somewhere in there is money and everything else. It's all tied together. And a lot of times, it makes people uncomfortable if you do discuss it. So I think I'll just stay, although it's an interesting idea, and it's somewhat, there are parts of it that are appealing. I think I'll just stay talking about something that nobody's scared of, which is shaving. But thank you very much for the comment, Josh. I do greatly appreciate it. I also got a letter from Jason saying thanks for the podcast. Rick, I'm 37 years old, and I got into traditional wet shaving in December after having used multi-blade cartridges and goo in a can since I was 15, followed by an electric shaver for 18 months before telling myself, there's got to be a better way. I dreaded shaving for 20-plus years, and I only shaved on consecutive days if I felt like I had to for professional appearance purposes. I started doing some research online about shaving in general, which led me to discover a treasure trove of great information on Badger and Blade, Sharpologist.com, Shaving101.com, and many other sites. After a couple weeks of extensive reading and YouTube viewing, I decided to jump into my new adventure with a Merkur 34C HD, still the only razor I own, a tub of Taylorville Bond Street Sandalwood Cream, an Edwin Jagger Pure Badger brush, and a sampler selection of blades from West Coast Shaving. I spent the next few months learning and practicing to shave properly. I began shaving comfortably every morning before work. Looking in the mirror and feeling my face before I shave, I can't believe that I regularly went to work with 1 or 2 days worth of stubble. Shaving has become a joy instead of a chore. My shave den has since grown to include 3 brushes, 10 soaps and creams, and 16 aftershave options, including the fine sampler. My 3-year-old son now has a toy shaving kit, and we have a blast shaving together on Saturday nights after his bath. I can't wait till he's old enough to learn how to shave for real like Daddy. My newfound hobby drove me to dive further into the rabbit hole of wet shaving information available on the internet, which led me to discover your podcast in March while searching for wet shaving on iTunes. Of course, I found Douglas and Ryan's podcast at the same time. I began binge listening to your episodes starting with the first one, and I caught up in the middle of April. Since then, I've looked forward to my Thursday commute to and from the office, which is when I listen to the latest episode. I enjoy your product reviews, stories about your vintage Gillette and other razors, and of course, your weekly rant tying in wet shaving to everyday life. Heck, some of the topics don't even interest me personally, shavettes and single-edge razors to name a couple, yet I still enjoy listening to you sharing your own experiences. Keep up the great work, and thanks so much for adding to the enjoyment of this wonderful new hobby that I look forward to practicing every day. Regards, Jason. Well, thank you very much for the letter. And just to be completely transparent, he also put in a P.S. He says, I'm compelled to express my disappointment with the replacement of the theme music and segment transition music bits. The new electronic theme music doesn't seem to fit, if that makes any sense. Perhaps it will grow on me. Anyway, if the original theme music is indeed gone for good, could you please pass along the name of the artist and the songs you used? I'd like to find the original music and listen to it every now and then. Thanks again, and be well. Well, I'll go ahead and send him that information. The reason that I changed the music is I wanted the music to be mine. I wanted it to be 100% without any strings attached, mine. Especially when I'm doing things like YouTube and stuff like that. When I first did this, way back when, the music has been around forever. It really has. I actually downloaded the music for a project that I was doing probably 5 or 7 years ago. So the original music had been around for a long, long time. But I wanted to change, and I wanted something that was, in fact, mine. So that's what I've done, and that's why I've done it. For better or for worse, I hope it does grow on you. It's starting to grow on me. So I kind of enjoy it. So anyhow, Jason, thank you very much for the letter. I'm very happy to know that you've found wet shaving and that you're also sharing it with your son. That is big. That really is. It's one of those things that will create memories for both you and him that will last the rest of your lives. So, Jason, thank you very much. Thank you for listening, and thank you for being there. This week, I have been using almost exclusively my Omega Boar's Hair brush. Now, the boar's hair brush that I have here is a chrome-handled boar brush that has a very, very large loft. I mean, the knot on this thing is huge. It's like 65 millimeters, I think it is. Hold on a second. Let me measure it here. The knot is, 65 millimeters in height, and it's 28. It's about 28 millimeters in diameter. This monster is huge. And I've used it, for about a week, and I lather it up and I soak it once or twice a day, and I'm doing everything that I can to break this thing in. And while it's gotten softer, and this is just my impression of it, I can't help but compare it to my Samogs, and it's almost like, even though looking at it, it doesn't look that way. I mean, the fibers look about the same size. It feels like the bristles, the fibers, the hairs that are in this brush are twice the size of the ones in my Samog. This, It has gotten a little softer, okay, but nowhere near the softness of my Samog. Now, it may, over time, soften up some more. And I have looked, and I mean, there is some splitting of the tips that is going on. But this is not a Samog. Am I disappointed? No. For the price point, this is an excellent little brush. Now, the other thing that I've noticed is this thing sheds like nobody's business. I mean, there's always a hair coming loose or something, coming out or whatever on this thing, which was not the case on either one of my Sabog brushes when I broke them in. So while this thing is breaking in, it's not really blooming much. I mean, it's a big brush, but it's not blooming a whole lot. The other thing is that's just, I don't know, it's not necessarily annoying. I guess you get used to it. But this thing, because the brush is so large, it just soaks up the soap. It's like a lather sponge. Yeah, I can whip up a bowl of lather, and it will all be in the brush. There's none really left in the bowl. Now, in my Samog, I've got some in the brush, some in the bowl. I have a good visual, idea of what the lather is doing because I can actually see it because it's in the bowl. With the Omega, I can't really see it. It's all in the brush. It's very difficult for me to gauge what the heck is going on. Do I have enough water? Do I not have, do I have too much? Do I have too little? Where am I at? Blah, blah, blah. It's difficult for me to see because it's all in the brush. Now, the thing is that there's so much in the brush, you could probably do 4 or 5 passes, with the soap that is held within this brush. It's great for face lathering, except for the fact that when you put it on, the brush, the loft is so big that it kind of splays all over your face, It's like you're doing your cheek and you're getting soap in your eyeball. I mean, it's just big. And again, the thing that I'm comparing it to is my Samogs or my Badger brushes. My Badger brushes all have, smaller lofts. So, it's kind of my first experience with, I guess, a big boy here. I don't know. I've tried to like this brush, and it's a nice brush, but it's not a great brush. Now, my Samog is a great brush. The Polisson is a great brush. This thing here, it's a nice brush. It's not a great brush. So what I'll probably end up doing is I'll probably piff this or sell it or do something with it. I don't know. I always say that, but I never do. They just sit on my shelf, and I look at them. One of these days I'll get around to actually doing something with some of this stuff. But I just wanted to give you guys a follow-up after a week of using this Omega brush. Again, it's not a bad brush. Would I say, no, don't buy an Omega? No, not at all. For what they are, for the price point, they're good brushes. They really are. A little bit more money, I think you can do better. But that's just me. It's to each his own. Now, the one thing that's nice about this thing is I do like the handle. The handle is nice on this thing. It's large enough to really get your hands on, which I enjoy. Now, again, I've tried to like this brush. And it probably sounds like I dislike it. I don't. It's just, if I was to buy an inexpensive brush and I had a choice between an Omega and a Van der Hagen, I would buy the Omega. I think the Omega is a better brush than the Van der Hagen. I think I can say that. But for another, $10, I'd buy a Samog and be happy. Anyhow, I wanted to give you my report of my experience with my Omega brush, and I'm going to put that one up on the shelf. I may use it from time to time. I don't know if it's going to get any softer. To me, it kind of gives and the reason I say this is because it kind of reached a certain softness about 4 days ago, 5 days ago, and it really hasn't gotten any softer than that at all. It's just it's plateaued. It's right there. It's not getting any better. So there it goes up on the shelf, and there it will sit, and life will continue on. shaving on a daily basis and enjoying it, and I may pick it up from time to time, but for right now, well, there it is. The case of the unscented soap. Recently, the sophomore shaver, who I happen to work with, handed me a sample of soap. And he said, "Here, try this out." I said, "Okay, what is it?" He said, "I just want you to try it out. There's something unique about it, and it annoys me, and I wanted to find out if it annoyed you as well." Well, we got to talking about it, and essentially, in his opinion, the thing that was annoying about it was that it didn't have any scent. He said, very similar to me with mentholated soaps, that, the Arctic soaps, the Vostoks, the things that cool your face at the same time, I find them to be, distracting. And he said, this unscented soap has the same effect and impact on me. I find it just distracting. I'm anticipating a smell, and the fact that it's not there just, bothers me. Okay, so I said I would try it out. And I did. And to a certain extent, I understand the issue. Because there is no scent whatsoever. There is nothing there but, the foam, the lather, the shave cream, whatever, it's just there. And it really, especially after having tested and played with and done all the things that I've done with all the soaps and creams that have scents, to have one that doesn't, it does. It just seems off, odd, different. Now, don't get me wrong, if that's the only thing that you can shave with because of allergic reactions and things like that, I understand completely. And if you're used to it, I don't believe it would be as much of an issue. However, if you are someone like me or like the sophomore shaver who has been playing around with soaps with fairly strong scents and enjoys something that has a fairly strong scent profile, something, that you don't have to chase around the room to find, something that's, right there, especially in the morning when you're trying to wake up, something that makes its presence known. If that's what you've been doing for the last 6, 8 months, year, then to go from that to an unscented soap is in fact, distracting. And in fact, what I found myself doing in the middle of my shave, not really thinking about it, is I was going back over the same place because without putting extra lather on. And one of the things that I realized I was doing is that because I couldn't smell it, I was missing that cue, that hint that I'm normally used to, that when I get done, I can't smell it anymore. Time to put more on. Put more on, do another pass, can't smell anymore. Time to put more on. Put more on, good to go. I was missing that cue. And because of that, I actually found myself giving myself, a rather rough shave until I realized what I was doing and went, oh, darn, oops. To a certain extent, shaving is a matter of habit. It's a matter of familiarity. If you're familiar with your equipment and if you have a certain methodology that you use, a certain pattern of things that you do time after time, in that instance and in those situations, when you throw in a shave soap that doesn't have any scent, the sophomore shaver's right. You can be just distracted by it, and it can be just a touch annoying. Anyhow, on this point, I agree with him wholeheartedly. I think he hit the nail on the head, and I too found it, just a bit distracting. So there's my quick review of an unscented shave soap. Now, the soap itself performed beautifully because it comes from a manufacturer who knows how to make very nice shave soaps. But the main key thing here that I'm trying to get across is that if you're used to scented soaps and you happen to get yourself an unscented one, well, just be very cognizant of the fact it may prove to be distracting for you as well. The soap that I've been using this week is none other than Tabac. Now, Tabac is a German soap. It's been around for a while. It seems to be very well liked. And from the performance standpoint, I can understand this. It performed very, very nicely for me. Now, the one thing that was, intriguing, I guess, is the best word for it, because it's not often that I get stumped. But with this soap, I was just a tad stumped. Now, I was using my the Omega brush for most of the week, and the thing that I was noticing is that while the brush does in fact absorb soap like a sponge, I still wasn't getting a just overly generous lather with Tabac. Now, the performance of the soap was great. I mean, it had great glide and great cushion and, really nice skin feel, and it smells nice. It's kind of a lightly spiced, soapy, flowery thing going on there. It's a little bit of pepper in it and a little bit of spice in it, and just a touch of, kind of a flowery accent with just a kind of a base note of just, soap. It's really a classic smell, and I really, really enjoyed it. But I was having trouble getting it to lather. Now, after having done this for a long time, and after having helped others, in their lathering emergencies, it was, befuddling. And so I started playing with it. It's just, just like I always tell people, you got to experiment with this stuff. And what I ended up doing is, under normal circumstances, the majority of soaps that I use end up using about 2 teaspoons of water. And so I would, put in the 2 teaspoons of water, usually about a teaspoon at a time, and lather, and things would be decent, but not overly abundant. And so I said, okay, what the heck? Let's just play with it. And then what I started to do is, add more water. Like I always tell people, add more water. What can possibly go wrong? Well, that's exactly what I did. And lo and behold, at about 2.5 to 3 teaspoons of water, this soap just kind of took off. Now, the thing that was interesting is that once it took off, it didn't take much after that to kind of lose its, it started getting foamy. Not terribly so. It started to develop, instead of a lather consistency, but more of a bubbly consistency. And it wasn't, it wasn't like this thing was like a washing machine, going nuts with foam pouring out of it or anything. It's just, it started. So, you knew that you were right on the edge of the performance. So it was interesting in that, I then tried my synthetic brush. I tried my other boar brush. I tried my Badger brushes. They all did a fairly reasonable job. But it wasn't the explosive, yogurt-type lather that I can get with some of my other soaps. And it finally dawned on me that this soap requires a good deal of water, and in fact has a fairly, if you're looking for that yogurt consistency, has a fairly narrow water window, as it were. Now, the thing is, and the thing that's intriguing about this soap is that if you're just looking for a soap that smells great and performs wonderfully, well, in that case, that window of water is very, very wide. You can go all the way from just a little bit of water, the amount of water that would normally be held in a boar brush or in a Badger brush, for example, all the way to 3 teaspoons of water, and things are just starting to get a little out of hand. Yeah, a very, very broad window. But again, it's not. There's a difference as you go through that window, and then as you're in there. It was curious. It was to a certain extent. Now, granted, don't get me wrong, it never failed from a performance point of view. So this has nothing to do with the soap's performance. It is a very, very nice soap, and I understand now why everybody uses it, because it works very well. It's not that expensive, and it does a great job. But it was kind of maddening to a certain extent. Kind of like a jigsaw puzzle where you just can't figure out where this one piece goes. Yeah, everything else is just kind of falling in place, but that one piece, it's like, okay, what the heck am I missing here? Try it this way, try it that way, try it the other way. Then you walk away from it, and you're just kind of, it's on your mind kind of thing, It was like that. Yeah. But Tabac in and of itself, a great soap. I really enjoyed it. It's been around forever. It's or at least for a long time. Like I said, it's about let's see, I think it's about $15 for a puck of soap. That's about 4 ounces. Made in Germany. Smells very, very nice. A very classic scent, a very masculine scent, I must say. It's hard to put my finger on exactly what it reminds me of, but there's something in my past that it reminds me of, and it eludes me. Kind of like making a lather with this stuff did. But that's kind of the fun of this hobby, is to run into those experiences and learn. Well, I went and got myself a new razor. Not only is this a new razor, but this is not a vintage razor. I bought myself, and it was used. I bought it on the Wet Shaving Enablers Facebook page. A gentleman there was selling it. I bought myself a Merkur 37C heavy-duty Slant. Now, this is the first Slant that I've ever owned. What are my impressions of it? Gee, let's see. Okay, first off, the construction of it is very nice. It's got, very nice plating on it and everything, and it's a two-piece. It's got a it's like some of the older Gillettes, the two pieces where you unscrew the bottom, and the bottom doesn't really move. It just kind of unscrews the top cap, and the top cap comes off with a shaft that goes down into the handle, and then 2 alignment pins that hold everything in place. The loading of this thing is fairly straightforward if you hold the blade on the ends. If you hold the blades on the ends, then that long rod actually helps facilitate guiding everything in place so that everything comes down and tightens up and works. Now, the handle, the knurling on it is very, very nice. I've really enjoyed that. It's got it's fairly, it's not terribly deep knurling, but at the same time it's very grippy. And so I have enjoyed that. It provides a very nice feel. The bottom part, the bottom part that you turn to unscrew the top cap is just a little bit larger than the handle, which kind of gives a shelf almost for your fingers to sit. And so that's been nice, especially when holding in various positions. I have enjoyed that. When looking at the razor, you look at it and part of me looks at it and says, how the heck did they make this thing? It's one of those unique things because of the slant of the cap and of the base plate. It's just, you look at it and you think, how did they do that? It had to be one of these things where I don't know. I really don't know. And I'm trying to think what would be the best way to do it. I don't know if it was cast or if it was pressed or what. It's unique. It's interesting. Okay, so enough talking about the visual appearance about the thing. How the heck does it shave? Let's see. What's the best way to describe this thing? Oh my God. This thing gives absolutely fantastic shaves. Last week I read a letter from a guy who was talking about the Gillette Slide. This thing does that just instinctively, automatically. It cuts at an angle like a guillotine. I mean, that's why the blades on a guillotine are slanted like they are, because they cut better that way. This thing is a shave monster. I was sitting there the first couple of times I was using it, feeling my face going, holy crap, this thing is a wonderful device. This is a stubble killer. This is wonderful. This gives great shaves. And I'm thinking, oh God, I've reached nirvana. It's like, okay, so I have a Plisson synthetic brush, which I've never felt anything softer at all. It does an absolutely marvelous job. Okay, so the brush, taken care of, check, done, okay? I have these absolutely wonderful artisan soaps, whether they be, How to Grow a Mustache, Katie's Bubbles, whatever. I mean, the soaps that I have are fabulous soaps, So it's like, okay, check the soaps. I mean, that's covered. There are plenty of things out there that, and now, I've got this razor that it's like, good gosh, do I ever want to pick up another one? I mean, this thing is fantastic without any work, without any effort. I mean, my standard 2 pass and a touch-up, and it's just, I'm done. It's just, and it really is a touch-up. It's not like go over the same place 3 or 4 times in 4 different directions to try to get that last little bit of stubborn stubble. It's like, a touch-up, 1 stroke, boom, done, gone. Whoa. When the heck was shaving ever supposed to be this easy? I mean, come on. I thought shaving was supposed to be something that you kind of did passes over and over and over again and let the weight of the razor take, and all that good stuff. Holy crap. I haven't even taken this thing in the shower. I'm scared of it. It's like, in a shower shave situation, this thing, 1 pass and you're done. It's like, holy cow. Jeez. To say that I am impressed would be an understatement. If all slant razors perform at this level, holy crap, why are we using anything else? I mean, I understand the desire to have a good, single-edged or a good double-edged razor. I understand that, but just from my experience so far, from an efficiency point of view, and I'm not using a terribly good blade in this thing either. I'm using a Wilkinson, it's a Gillette Wilkinson sword. I mean, that's what it says on it, on the package anyhow. It's a Gillette Wilkinson sword blade. Okay, so let's see. If I look at the actual blade that I've had in here, and I've gotten, oh good gosh, 5, 6 shaves out of this thing so far. It's a Wilkinson sword blade. It says a Gillette product. Okay, so it's a Wilkinson blade. I don't, I'll have to do a little bit of research, but it's a blue package. It says Gillette and Wilkinson both at the same time on the thing, and I'm sitting here thinking, this thing has given a fantastic shave for the last week. It boggles the mind what this thing would be like if I put a feather in this sucker. I'm a little scared, It's really been, it's been eye-opening. It's been fantastic. It's been, it's almost like I've stepped to a new level, and it's interesting. I didn't expect a step change in feel and performance like that, but for me it truly was, and I don't think I'm a slouch with my double edge or my single edge. I mean, I get a good shave with them. I do what I think is a great job. Some of them are absolutely fabulous razors. But this thing just seemed, effortless. I guess the closest thing that I have to it, let's see. I think the closest thing that I've experienced in just wow factor was the auto strop with the feather blades in it. But then, granted, it was an excellent shave, but part of that wow factor, at least in my head, was the fact that I was doing that with a razor that was, 90 to 100 years old. This one's not that old. Anyhow, that's my report on the razor of the week, the Merkur 37C heavy-duty safety razor, slant bar. They're about $50. I did not pay for that for this. It was cost me about $35. Again, it's used, but that's okay. I mean, you're not going to wear one of these things out unless you run it over with a tank. I mean, it's a great little razor. I really enjoyed this thing. It's in my head. I'm sitting here thinking, I need to get a couple more slants just so I can compare them, because maybe there's a slant out there that's better. But golly. If this is what modern shaving is, yeah, I'm all for it. and then I look at that and I'm thinking to myself, okay, look, if you go from a single edge that you can't really twist because the blade's too thick, and you go to a double edge, and then slants have been around for a while. Why the heck did they get away from slants? Because good gosh, that's an efficient shaving machine there. And then, of course, it dawns on you, well, hell, they can't patent it, and that's probably why they can't make any money, and ta-da, follow the money. Anyhow, that's my report of the Merkur 37C. If you've never experienced a slant, yeah, I would recommend it, because there is a wow factor there, and it's, at least for me, it is highly recommended. About a year ago, I started. Now, this whole adventure started, well, as a blog. I started a blog on WordPress because, well, it didn't cost me any money. And so I wanted to see if I would enjoy blogging. Now, the whole reason that I started blogging about wet shaving is because I went to an antique store. I went to an antique store and I picked up a vintage Gillette Aristocrat. It had a little wear on the handle, and, other than that, it was in pretty good shape. I'd gone to Walmart, and I had bought some inexpensive, in fact, cheap even, Wilkinson double-edged blades. I put them in the razor. I had an old brush, and so I used that, and I had some old soap, and so I used that. It was a great shave. In fact, it was a fantastic shave. I really enjoyed it. It did something that I talked about later on in the show, and that is it slowed things down a little bit, which at the time was really kind of nice. It made me appreciate just the very fact that I was spending some time shaving and getting clean, and it gave me an opportunity to relax and reflect, and I enjoyed that. I started the blog to share the experience. After a while, I decided that I really didn't like typing, but I do enjoy talking. And so I started a podcast. Now, when I first started out the podcast, I started out with just a microphone and my computer. And you can definitely tell that that's what I started out with if you hear the first episodes. Now, because of my recent change to a new podcast host, you can't get to my old episodes via iTunes anymore, but you can still find them if you go to BrushnSoapnBlade.wordpress.com and look in the old shows, and you can find them because the feed is still active until they finally decide that they don't want me around and shut me off. I don't think they'll do that, though, just because in the beginning, when I first started my podcast, they didn't charge me anything. It was a free podcast host until I uploaded just so many episodes. So they may just leave it open and not worry about it. There are a lot of shows on that podcast host that have been around for a long time with no activity. So hopefully they'll keep it open. So that's how I started. I started with just a microphone, a computer, and a copy of Audacity, and, well, a thought. an idea, something that I thought would be interesting and maybe even fun. And then right after I started the podcast, I joined Twitter and kind of got into Twitter and started doing tweets and meeting folks and having a good time there within the realm of social media. Now, I really hadn't done anything in social media before. It was kind of interesting. So, right now, a year later, I'm a little over 800 followers, which to me is absolutely fantastic. If someone had told me a year ago that I would have 800 followers on Twitter because of a podcast that I was doing, I would have probably told them they were nuts. But in fact, that's where I'm at, which is really kind of cool. Yeah, it was around episode 6, I think, that I started getting into vintage single-edged razors, which is a completely unique experience as well. It is different than double-edged razors. They're fine razors. They give excellent shaves, and oftentimes they're overlooked. They're not as desirable for some reason, which I find to be a great shame because, like I said, they give excellent shaves. It was also around episode 6 that I started doing rants. And in fact, the first one that I did was my pet peeve, specifically about people leaving razor blades in razors in antique shops and yard sales and things like that. It just irritates me because it's a safety issue, of course. Now, I got a little bit more serious about the podcast. And because of some of the issues that I was having with Audacity and my microphone and my computer, it was one of those things where if I did not wait long enough after starting a recording track, I would get almost like a mild feedback noise in the track. And if I started talking, it would be in there and I couldn't get it out. And so I started doing a little research, and I ended up buying myself a little digital recorder because that way I would get rid of the computer and all the software issues, and I'm just going straight into a device that is made specifically for recording things. And in fact, I use it even today, and it does a fine job. Bought it on eBay. It's getting a little bit more serious. It was also interesting. Around episode 8, I went out and I purchased a mixer, and it's a little Mackie mixer, and still using the same mixer, and it does a great job, and it improved the sound quality a little bit of the podcast, which is kind of what I wanted it for. Now, I also happen to be a ham radio operator, and so I thought to myself, after doing some research in these things, that I can always use the microphone and the mixer with my ham radio operation if at any time I decide, well, maybe podcasting isn't the thing for me. So I didn't consider it as money, I guess thrown away is not the word for it, money spent solely on podcast gear. But in fact, since I've had it, that's the only thing I've used it for. So that was rather interesting. Around episode 10, I did a little piece on a do-it-yourself scuttle, just a little homemade scuttle out of a berry bowl and the infamous salsa bowl. It was around right before then that I had talked about the salsa bowls, and I found something to do with them that was, well, a little bit extra and a little bit special. I mean, there was a lot of talk at the time of scuttles, and I wanted to just try one, but I didn't have the money to spend on one, but I found I could make one for less than $5. So that got a lot of traction. I had a lot of views on that one. People seemed to enjoy it. And the interesting thing is that when I first started my blog, I actually talked about certain forums, certain shave-related forums, as being good places to go, because that's where the information was. Now, of course, my do-it-yourself scuttle, I was putting this information up on forums. The problem is that I was linking my discussion back to my blog. We'll get into that in a minute. Now, around episode 11, I continued on with some of the rants, and it was actually around episode 13 that I decided, I really need to stop blogging altogether. I don't necessarily have the time to both blog and podcast at the same time. I don't really enjoy the typing. I enjoy rather speaking off the cuff, as it were, instead of sitting down and having to think about things and type. So, starting with episode 13, I pretty much stopped the printed blog and went solely with the podcast. Around episode 25, I created a GoogleVoice so that people could call in to the Wet Shaving Hotline, and I have received many phone calls since then. So that's been really, really nice. In episode 27 and 29, I got to enjoy my son's first shave, my youngest son. That was a unique experience, and I was very happy to have been there for that. And it was one of those things that I enjoyed sharing. It's one of the memories of the podcast in the past year. I started doing interviews around episode 39. In fact, my first interview was with Douglas Smythe and Ryan Stephen Green of Mustache and Blade fame, the other Wet Shaving Podcast. And Douglas Smythe is also the proprietor of How to Grow a Mustache. And me and him have a friendship that goes back, to the very beginning. Round 42, episode 42, I did an interview with Chris Bailey of YouTube fame, the traditional shaving evangelist. It was interesting. I continued with the interviews in 51, but you'll notice it took me a while to get from the first two interviews to the third interview. I found that after having spent weeks upon weeks of telling people, talking into the microphone and telling you guys what my shave routine was for the week, what I had experienced, what I had run into, what I had done, I found that I missed that. I found that, the interviews were nice and all, but they got in the way of me, talking to you guys. And so I didn't do one for a while. I enjoy speaking. Around episode 51 that I finally got another interview, and that was with Chris Cullen of Katie's Bubbles. And it was around that time, right after that, pretty much all heck broke loose. The podcast feed stopped updating to iTunes. I was all kinds of stuff. I talked about it in my past episode. It's not important now. But it has been an exceptionally interesting year. I've seen a lot of things. I've seen my collection go from a couple of vintage Gillette double-edged razors to a plethora of vintage double-edged razors. I think I have most of them from about 1940, I guess, on. So I think I have just about I think I have just about one of every model from the 1940s on that they made. I think the only one that I'm missing is a black tip Super Speed. Don't have one of those, but I'm working on that. I also have a vast assortment at this point of single-edged razors. Somewhere in the mix, in fact, I also started picking up old injector razors. It was probably sometime this last spring that I did that. So I probably have at this point a collection of probably close to 40 different razors. Some have been very, very wonderful. Some have been, not so wonderful. Some have been mild. Some have been too aggressive. Most, quite honestly, have been nice, gentle, average, medium aggressiveness, everyday, tried and true razors. There's only been a couple that I would not consider loaning to somebody, giving to somebody, and saying, here, have a great shave. So that's been unique. I have seen in the past year, and hopefully you've noticed it as well, a plethora of people, artisans, making shaving brushes. There are the big companies, of course, but there's also an industry that is cropping up with people turning absolutely beautiful handles and sticking knots in them and selling very nice shaving brushes. It's really been an amazing explosion. There's also been an absolute explosion of soap makers. And that is very interesting. There are a lot of different scents, a lot of different formulations. There are nuances. There are, some will do the same scent. 5 different people will make the same scent, and they'll all be slightly different and all absolutely wonderful. It's really been interesting to see that explosion of artisans that are making soaps and making scents and aftershaves and just all kinds of stuff. It's really been fantastic to be out here watching. We are in the middle of an explosion of wet shaving. People are experiencing it for the first time and discovering that, yes, indeed, it is, fun, enjoyable, and a good hobby. It's really been fantastic to see. There are even people out there that are making new razors. New double-edged razors, and in fact, new single-edged razors. Now, some people are retasking tried and true brands, getting the heads and putting different handles on them and things like that. But there are also companies that are making just completely new razors. And that really is something that is rather fantastic. Creating a razor is not something for the meek financially. There is something to be said for creating it and getting it built in quantities that are large enough to be sustainable. The razors that have been created from the reports on the internet have been fantastic, which is really, really good. That to me, that means that the people making them are making them out of absolute love for what they do, and that's a good thing. So it's been a very, very interesting year. If you had told me when I first started that I would have made it all the way through a year of podcasts every single week, I would have told you, nah, there's no way, you're nuts. I've come to enjoy it. I've come to realize that it has become almost a part of me, which is rather unique. It has created a centering and a balance in my life to the point where my life at times has been utter absolute chaos, but the one constant that I have is this podcast. So it has been very good from that aspect for me. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. I think you have. My numbers keep going up. People keep listening. I keep getting subscribers. I now have a YouTube channel and have been blessed with a very quick acceptance of my YouTube channel. The numbers are going up there as well, and I thank you for it. It's really been an interesting journey. Now, you have to understand, even when I speak from time to time or send emails to other podcasters, they think I am absolutely out of my mind nuts. Why? Well, because wet shaving is such a niche market. But the thing that's interesting and the thing that is so exciting about it is that I am seeing, even in this past year, I am seeing this niche open up to a crack. And eventually that crack will open up into who knows what. We're at the beginning. This thing is going to blow open, and it's going to be huge. I have a feeling. And I think the reason for that is that people are finally starting to understand that it's up to them to go out and find what works best for them and not accept somebody else telling them what's best for them. And that's a good thing. Anyhow, I just wanted to do a quick year in review. Thank you for making my year special. It has been an exceptionally special year. I've greatly enjoyed producing these podcasts. I've greatly enjoyed sharing my journey with you. And I greatly enjoy and thank you for being there to share with. So this is one of those rants that I'm probably going to get into that I have delayed doing for a long time, and I have thought about it long and hard as to whether to do it at all. But I feel it needs to be done. Only because I want people to understand that, well, sometimes the things that you see and the things that you hear really are being told to you for reasons other than what you probably think. So what's this one about? I'm going to talk about forums. I'm going to talk about forums in general. I'm not going to call out any specific forums. I will talk about forums in general. And part of the reason that I have delayed doing this is that probably about 8 months or so ago, I got thrown off a couple of forums. And at the time, I was terribly upset about it. But I thought, and I thought, and I thought, and I said, okay, why? And then some other things have happened in forums, and I think about them, and I say, why? Now, here's the problem with forums. They're a double-edged sword. Let me explain. When I first started out my blog back about a year ago, one of the things that I talked about was the fact that there were certain forums that were out there that were great because they held copious amounts of information. That's where everybody went. And in fact, if you Google wet shaving, typically the first thing that comes up is one of the forums, which is a good thing because especially for guys just starting out and not necessarily knowing what is available and what's out there, it's a great source of information. Now, the interesting thing about forums, and this is the part that it's funny to a certain extent. Forums started out way back in the internet age when people had bulletin boards. And one of the things is that when you signed up to a bulletin board or a forum back then, because you really didn't have anything like Google at the time, in your signatures, in your signature line, you had a place where you could put blogs and feeds and web pages, and quite honestly, that's how people found things. Now, the thing that's interesting is if you look at most modern forums, they have not really changed the format of those signature lines. And those signature lines ask for things like blogs, web pages, things like that people dutifully fill out. And then wonder why they get in trouble because somebody on a forum somewhere, some admin says, wait a minute, you can't have that. Get that off of there. Okay. Well, if you don't want me to have it, why do you have it up there as a choice to begin with? And most of the time it's just because, well, people are lazy and they haven't bothered to take it off from the forum template that really has been around forever. Now, the other interesting thing about forums is that forums, by and large, cost money. Now, the money is not necessarily for the forum itself. The money is for the bandwidth so that multiple tens of thousands of people can go in and out of the forum on a monthly basis. And that bandwidth is what is being charged to whoever owns the forum site, who owns the domain name, etc. Most of the forums pay for this bandwidth, pay for the domain name and everything else, and in some cases even the administration of the forum, by having sponsors, paid sponsors, which is okay. I have no problem. Please don't misunderstand. I have no problem with paid sponsors. The problem then becomes is that when you have paid sponsors, you now have an obligation to those sponsors, and if you are relying on those sponsors to pay the bills, one of the ways that you do that is by keeping them in front of the people on the forum, which means that whatever you do in the forum, you have to make sure that once a person gets into the forum, they don't leave. Remember those signature lines, in people's profiles? You can't have those. The reason that you can't have those is that if somebody is perusing a forum and sees something or wants to touch base with somebody, say, for example, they see a shaving blog. Aha! Well, let's go click on this person's blog link, and we now have gone off of the forum and over to the other person's blog. All of a sudden, the person who is doing this searching is not looking at the paid advertising that the forum wants you to look at. The whole thing is about money. If I'm paying to have advertising on a site, the one thing that I want is I want the people that go to that site that I'm paying for, by the way, through my sponsorship, I want my advertising to be in front of them all the time. That's what I'm paying for. So if you start to think about that, then all of a sudden you realize that everything that happens on a forum typically happens to prevent anybody from getting off of that forum and going somewhere else. Have you ever wondered why people don't allow things like eBay links? Why is that? Well, because if you have an eBay link, now they'll couch it in terms like, oh, well, we can't have that because there may be viruses. Baloney, okay? What it is that if you click on an eBay link, now all of a sudden you're on eBay, and if there's any advertising, you're looking at eBay's advertising instead of the forum's advertising. And please don't misunderstand. This is not just directed at wet shaving forums. It's in just about every forum that is out there. Or what ends up happening is a forum may start out and have grandiose ideas to be different, but over time, especially when they get more and more members, they get up to a certain bandwidth size that they really have to start paying the bills, and then they start getting serious about sponsors. And once they do that, then they start ratcheting the control tighter and tighter so that nothing takes you off of that forum. Any buy-seller trades, they have to be on the forum. They can't be going over to eBay or going to somebody else's site. You can't have links to blogs. You can't have links to YouTube videos. You can't do any of that because as soon as you do any of that, you come off of their forum and get away from their advertising, and now you're looking at somebody else's advertising. Whoa, we can't have that. You're on our forum. We want you to look at our advertising. That's why they do it. It shouldn't be a secret, nor should it be a surprise, but that's the reality. The problem is especially for the new guys, a lot of people don't know this. And so, for example, people, a forum will throw YouTube videos off. No, you can't put YouTube videos on here anymore. Why? Oh, well, we can't police all that. Okay, so you can police written stuff all day long and spend your time reading the written word, but you can't sit there multitask while you're listening to a YouTube video and do something else at the same time and pay attention for, certain things that you don't want on there. That's interesting. Personally, I think it's because what ends up happening is as soon as you do that, you then come off of their forum and onto YouTube. And now you're looking at YouTube's advertising. Well, YouTube did not pay, and the advertisers on YouTube did not pay the forum at all. Therefore, the forum isn't making any money. They're not keeping traffic. And the sponsorship rates that they charge are based solely on how many eyes see it. So, that's how that works. Now, the other thing that is really just darned annoying, and this is the part, I suppose, that really kind of upsets me more than anything else. I don't mind, if somebody has a forum, fine. It's their forum. They can have their rules. If they want to throw me off, I'm okay with that. I've got other avenues. It doesn't break my heart. Especially now that I kind of sat back, thought about it, and realized what's going on. Okay, I understand. It's their forum, their rules, no problem. But this is where I have an issue. If someone has a blog, or if someone has a YouTube channel, or if someone is just starting up a business, these forums, and again, this is not just the shaving forums. There are a lot of other forums that do this. These forums will instantaneously jump on these folks and say, you can't be here, you can't talk about your blog, you can't talk about your soap making business, your razor making business, your enterprise to sell samples. You can't talk about any of it in any way, shape, or form. You can't link to it. You can't do anything to get your name out at all, ever, unless you become a vendor. Okay. On the outside, that sounds pretty good. The thing that most people don't understand is what they really mean is, if you pay up, we will certify you as a vendor. And the going rate is typically between about $100 and $300 a year to be a vendor. Now, keep this in mind. You can't talk or link or do anything else unless you pay the price. Now, one of the things that kind of upset me a little bit was, let's look at this scenario. A guy starts out and he happens to be a soap maker. We'll take soap makers usually because people can associate someone making soap on an artisan level. So you have a guy who makes a couple of soaps, sends them out to his buddies, talks about it a little bit on the forum. He hasn't sold anything. He's just giving it out. Here, try this. I made this. People start talking about it. Some of his buddies say, you really ought to sell this stuff. This is good stuff. The guy thinks about it a while. He's right here in front of all these people who are talking about this on the forum, and he thinks, okay, I've got people here that would be willing to buy my stuff. So he turns around and he invests his hard-earned money and time into the stuff he needs to ramp up production and create his product. As soon as the forum admins find out about it, the first thing that they tell him is, okay, stop, cease, desist, you can't talk about it. The only way we'll let you stay on the forum is if you pay up to become certified as a vendor. And of course, they couch it when they tell everybody else that, well, we need people to follow the rules. What that means is they need you to pay up. It's extortion at its base level. Now, people may disagree with me all they want, but to me, it is. Let me explain. Here's a person who started a business, who has really no customers at this point, who potentially hasn't even sold anything yet. And yet, in order to even say that he is out there and available, he has an additional price for entry of between $100 and $300 just to let people that would, potentially buy this stuff know that he's out there and available. Now, this is not a banner ad, mind you. That costs more. This is just to be a vendor and to have a vendor tag associated so that he can stay on the forum And he may not even at that point be able to link to anything. Okay? That's an awful high price of entry just to sell something as simple as soap. Think about that for a minute. Now, it happened to me, okay? I'm trying not to make this about me, but it is a good example. I had linked, and I will admit, I did not read the rules of the forum as thoroughly as I should have, and yes, I will admit I, in fact, violated their rules. Okay? I said it. No hard feelings. They did what they did. That's fine. Again, this is just an example. The example is that as soon as I had linked something when I was talking to somebody on a forum, I was responding to something, and I linked back to my blog. And you know, I had said, hey, I wrote about this very same thing on my blog. Now, keep in mind, in my head anyhow, I'm a better talker than I am a typist, so I don't like typing. All right? Well, I typed all this stuff up already on the blog. I didn't want to retype it. So I linked over to the blog. Now, am I selling anything? No, not at all. I'm just talking about stuff. But again, remember the whole idea of the forum is to keep forum members on the forum. And that's the way it works. So immediately the admins jumped on me and said, okay, stop. First off, you have to take your blog, your web link for your blog off of your signature line. Okay, I did that. You can't talk about anything that you've done on your blog at all. Okay, all right. And the only way that we'll let you stay around is if you pay, at the time, $300, so that we can call you a vendor. Wait a minute. I'm not a vendor. I'm a podcaster. Well, that's okay. You're reviewing stuff. Well, yeah, I'm reviewing stuff, but the majority of stuff that I'm reviewing is like stuff that I buy, and others are stuff that, you know, friends give me and things to say, here, check this out, review this. Well, that doesn't matter. You know, if you want to stay, you can be a vendor, but it'll cost you $300. What? Really? Okay, remember, we're talking price of entry. All we're talking about is a podcast, or for some people who have been thrown off forums, for blogs, for reviews. It starts, you know, when you look at it from the aspect of money generation, you think to yourself, holy crap, how many vendors do they have that have paid up? That's quite a list. Making a pretty penny there, aren't we? And then when you look at the banner ads and realize they probably cost more, well, that's interesting. Now you're not talking about just little artisans. Now you're talking about other big players here. Now you're talking about some serious cash. And all of a sudden it starts to make sense. Because again, in most cases, you know, it's follow the money. And the money leads directly to what's going on in a lot of forums. Again, it's not, I have been on a lot of forums, and I've been kicked off a good number of them too. It's just one of those things. And that's one of the reasons why places like Reddit have exploded. It's also one of the reasons that places like Facebook have exploded. It's gotten to the point where if somebody is, I saw one the other day, somebody had made something and they told the person talking about it, well, you can't talk about it. And so they deleted all those posts, and then they had another little bit of trouble because someone who was backing the project talked about it. So now not only can the people directly involved in the project not potentially talk about it, now the backers of the project can't talk about it either. So how do you get the word out? Well, you end up going to Facebook or Reddit or something like that and let everybody know. And the problem is that then you have two kinds of people that are on the forums. You have the new folks who don't really know any different, don't understand what's going on, and you have the old cadre, if you will, of people who, by God, this is my forum and I'm going to stick by it through thick and thin. And it almost becomes a political thing. It's like whatever the forum does is A-OK and they can do no wrong. I'll support them 100%. You know, when somebody tells you that they had to clean up the posts because a backer of a project talked about it in a post on a forum somewhere, and they're not playing by the rules. Well, the rules are that they haven't paid up. That's exactly what that means. Because they are quick to offer, well, yeah, you can stay. Still can't talk about any of your stuff, but you can stay as long as you pay the price. Interesting. Anyhow, like I said, I'm not upset about it. I'm not upset about it at all, and I hope I haven't given you the impression. It's just, it's been one of those things, and in fact, for a while, and in fact, the offer's still open. If anybody wants to do an ad on my podcast for shave-related stuff, let me know. You can do it for free. I haven't charged anybody for an ad on my show since I started, because my main thing that I was trying to do is get the word out so that people, listening to the podcast at least, would be able to hear advertisements and not have to worry about who was paying who. I don't charge a dime for my advertisements. And in fact, I've told people that, you know, if you didn't have ad copy created, but you wanted to do an ad, let me know. I'll help you write it. If you don't have anybody to record it, I'll help you record it too. My main premise was I wanted to get the word out. So again, you know, for me, it's never been about the money. It's been about getting the word out. Now, the interesting thing is that there was a bunch of people that took me up on the offer early on, and then it just kind of died down. It's almost like nobody's really interested in doing advertising on the show. That's okay. If they ever change their mind, they'll let me know, I figure. But the offer is open. Anybody that wants to advertise shave-related goodies on the show, let me know, and we'll work something out. Because you know, I don't charge for them. I'm not about the money. That's not what this show was ever about. But you need to watch out, and you need to at least be aware of how forums operate. Because sometimes what they do is not what they portray. And sometimes when they say, play by the rules, I'm hearing the tune of The Godfather somewhere in the distance. I don't know, maybe it's just me. It's one of those things. But if somebody says, you need to play by the rules, yeah, it's more like you need to pay up. It's a curious thing, forums are. Kind of sad in a way. But, I mean, I understand there's a desire and there's a need. And I understand that these forums have been around a long time and they have created a very large following. They can make whatever rules they want to make. I'm not saying they can't. But what I will say is I really think that in the greater scheme of things, they're really missing the boat and missing the opportunity to truly connect with the members that are on that forum by doing the things that they do. And again, this is not just wet shaving forums. There are a lot of forums out there that do this. And this is to all of them. You're missing an opportunity. If you were more open, you would actually have a better forum audience. Anyhow, that's my 2 cents. That's my pseudo rant. Call it a calm rant. A discussion point, as it were. Anyhow, have a great week. Well, that concludes this episode of the Brush and Soap and Blade Podcast. I hope you enjoyed listening to it as much as I enjoyed making it. If you have some suggestions or would like a topic covered, drop me an email at BrushnSoapnBlade@gmail.com or give me a call at 864-372-6234 or contact us on Twitter at BrushnBlade. You can also visit us at our blog, BrushnSoapnBlade.wordpress.com. As always, we're available on iTunes and Stitcher.